Last week, a 2001 Honda Civic came into the shop that looked ordinary on the outside, but hid an absurd detail. Almost 500,000 kilometers driven on the original engine. Factory pistons, original rings, valves never replaced. When I started the car, it ran so smoothly that I thought the dashboard had to be lying. No strange vibration, no metallic noise. But the maintenance records confirmed everything. The owner had never done anything miraculous. He simply followed what he called the Japanese oil change method. I decided to remove the valve cover, expecting to find clear signs of wear, sludge, or dark varnish buildup. What appeared before my eyes was unsettling. The camshaft looked newly installed. No burned residue, no crust stuck to the surfaces. The valves moved freely, without sticking, and the cam lobes showed practically no signs of friction. It was like looking at an engine with very low mileage, not one that had already driven more than most people do in an entire lifetime. Inside, that engine was cleaner than many I see every day with less than 100,000 kilometers. I asked the owner directly what he did differently. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket, full of handwritten notes. He said he learned that from a Japanese mechanic years earlier. According to him, it is not enough to change the oil. The secret is in the order, the right moment, and the care taken before and after the change. I photographed those notes and spent the next 3 months applying this method to customer cars, my own vehicles, and even my son's first car. The results left no room for doubt. Engines that started following this process showed less internal wear, practically did not consume oil, and became quieter over time. I have worked with mechanics for almost 2 decades, and I can say without exaggeration, this Japanese method is one of the most important things you can do to dramatically increase the life of your engine. In this video, I will show exactly how this procedure works and why almost no one outside Japan knows this oil change standard. Before explaining the method itself, it is important to understand why the most common way of changing oil fails when the goal is to keep the engine healthy for hundreds of thousands of kilometers. Most people see an oil change as something automatic. They wait for the dashboard light to come on, go to a shop, sit in the waiting room, and leave half an hour later thinking everything is solved. But what happens inside the engine during this process is very different from what you imagine. In most cases, the engine is cold. This is done for convenience and speed. The problem is that cold oil is thick and does not drain completely. A significant part of the old oil, full of impurities, remains trapped inside the engine and mixes with the new oil. In addition, there is no cleaning process before draining. All the accumulated dirt, microscopic metal residue, and sludge particles keep circulating. The new filter is installed dry, without being pre-filled. This causes a few seconds without oil pressure at the first start. These seconds, repeated over the years, cause real wear on bearings, camshafts, and valves. And after that, the car is started and driven away immediately, without time for the new oil to spread properly through all the internal passages. No one checks for leaks carefully. Few people verify if the oil pressure is normal right after the change. This type of maintenance may work if you plan to change cars early. But if your goal is to go beyond 300 or 400,000 kilometers with the original engine, this habit will shorten the life of the assembly little by little. The Japanese method corrects all these points. It follows a specific sequence that begins even before loosening the drain plug. The first step is an internal pre-cleaning. With the engine completely cold, a small amount of new oil is added to the old oil. This helps dilute the old fluid and suspend the impurities that stick to the internal walls. Then, the engine is started and remains running at idle for exactly a few minutes, enough time for this diluted oil to circulate through all the internal galleries. After that, the engine is turned off and stays stopped for a few minutes so the oil can drain back to the bottom of the pan, carrying the loosened particles with it. This process performs a cleaning that the traditional oil change simply ignores. Instead of mixing new oil with old dirt, you are removing as much of this contamination as possible before refilling the system. The second point is draining with the engine hot. After this pre-cleaning, the car is driven until it reaches normal operating temperature. Driving for a few minutes is essential. Hot oil becomes thinner and can drain almost completely. Cold oil sticks to internal surfaces. Hot oil flows out carrying impurities with it. After stopping the car, the engine keeps running at idle for a short period, just to ensure that all the oil is well distributed. Then, it is turned off and the oil is drained immediately. The difference between draining hot oil and cold oil is huge over time. A small percentage of old oil left inside the engine at each change seems irrelevant, but accumulated over years, it represents much more internal wear than one might imagine. There is also a detail little known outside Japan: the double drain. After the hot oil is drained, the engine is not refilled right away. It remains stopped for a period to allow the oil trapped in internal channels, in the head, and in less accessible areas to slowly drain down. After that time, the drain plug is opened again and a new amount of old oil comes out. It is common to be surprised by the volume that still appears in this second drain. This extra oil is exactly what would mix with the new oil in the conventional method. Another essential point is filter preparation. A dry filter is never installed. Before threading it onto the engine, it is partially filled with fresh oil and the sealing ring receives a thin layer of lubricant. This ensures that, when the engine is started, oil pressure is established almost immediately. Without this care, the engine turns for a few seconds practically without proper lubrication, which contributes to accumulated wear over the years. When adding the new oil, the process is also more careful. Instead of pouring everything at once, the oil is added gradually. First, most of the recommended amount is poured in, then a few minutes are allowed for it to settle in the oil pan and internal passages, and only then is the level checked. The adjustment is made in small amounts until the ideal point is reached. A level slightly below the maximum is preferable to excess, because too much oil can cause foaming and increased internal pressure. The first start procedure also changes. The engine is not started immediately. First, the electrical system is activated for a few seconds without starting the engine, repeating this several times. This process helps build initial pressure without placing load on the engine. Only after that is the engine started and kept idling for a few minutes. During this period, leaks are checked and oil pressure is observed to rise normally. After this time, the engine is turned off, a few moments are allowed to pass, and the level is checked again. If necessary, it is topped off to the correct point. This care ensures that the new oil has circulated through all passages before the engine is subjected to load. This set of steps completely transforms the way the engine is preserved. Instead of simply replacing the oil, you create a cycle of cleaning, efficient draining, protection at startup, and precise level control. That is what explains how that Corolla managed to drive hundreds of thousands of kilometers without needing major internal interventions. If you made it this far, you have already realized that a simple oil change can be the difference between an engine that ages quickly and one that continues running like new for much longer. And if this type of information is useful to you, it is worth supporting the channel by leaving your like, subscribing, and activating notifications so you do not miss the next videos with real maintenance tips that extend your car's life. The seventh step is what many ignore, the break-in period for the new oil. Just as a newly assembled engine needs time to adjust, the freshly added lubricant also needs some kilometers to properly adapt to the internal surfaces of the engine. In the first 20 to 30 kilometers after the change, the ideal is to treat the car more gently than usual. Japanese mechanics follow very specific rules in this initial stretch. No hard acceleration, no high RPMs, and no attempts to reach high speeds. Engine speed should remain moderate, below the more aggressive range of the tachometer. Driving needs to be varied, without keeping the same speed for too long and without using cruise control. This is important because the oil needs to experience different loads and temperatures to distribute and adjust to the internal clearances of the engine. Avoiding long periods stopped is also part of the process, because the goal is to keep the fluid circulating through all internal passages. After this short period of gentle driving, normal use can be resumed without concern. These first kilometers work like a kind of fine adjustment between the new oil and the natural wear of the engine components. It is at this moment that the lubricant creates its protection pattern according to the specific characteristics of that mechanical assembly. Another fundamental point is not only the way the oil is changed, but the type of oil chosen. The Japanese method places great importance on lubricant quality. The recommendation is always to use fully synthetic oil that meets or exceeds the vehicle manufacturer's specifications. In engines from brands such as Toyota, Honda, and Mazda, the most common viscosities are usually 0W20 or 5W30, but this must be confirmed in the owner's manual. The brand also matters. It is important to choose manufacturers recognized in the market and avoid products of doubtful origin. There is also an important warning. Oils labeled as high mileage should only be used when there is excessive oil consumption or confirmed leaks. These products contain additives that change the behavior of internal seals and can cause undesirable effects in engines that are still in good condition. In addition, using a viscosity different from what is indicated in the manual does not bring extra protection. On the contrary, it can harm lubrication. Modern engines are designed to work with very specific oil thicknesses. Buying the product from trustworthy stores is also essential, since there are real cases of counterfeit oil being sold in the market. The change interval is another point where Japanese practice clashes with what is promoted in other countries. In many places, manufacturers indicate long intervals, reaching 10,000 kilometers between oil changes when synthetic oil is used. In Japan, practically no one exceeds 5,000 kilometers. The owner of that Corolla with almost 500,000 kilometers followed an interval close to this religiously, without exceptions. This care exists because oil deteriorates over time, not only with mileage. Constant heat, combustion residues, small amounts of fuel mixed with the oil, and even internal moisture contribute to reducing the lubricant's protective capacity. Around 7,000 kilometers, even a high-quality synthetic oil has already lost a significant part of its efficiency. The safest schedule works like this. Under normal use, change every 5,000 kilometers or 6 months, whichever comes first. Under severe conditions, such as heavy city traffic, short trips, and extreme temperatures, the ideal is to reduce it to around 4,000 kilometers or 4 months. In turbocharged engines, which operate at higher temperatures, the interval should be even shorter, between 3,500 and 4,000 kilometers. This means changing the oil more often than the manual suggests, but in return, the engine tends to last much longer without showing significant internal wear. Over the past few years, dozens of customers have started applying this complete method. The results were very similar among them. Engine operation became quieter. Valve train noises decreased noticeably after 2 changes done this way. The oil began to remain clean for a longer time. In engines where the oil darkened quickly, it now maintains a clear color for several thousand kilometers. Another effect observed was the reduction or even the disappearance of oil consumption between changes. Engines that previously required constant top-ups began to keep a stable level. When valve covers were removed on high-mileage vehicles, the internal surfaces were clean, without heavy residue buildup. In practical terms, this translates into engines easily surpassing 250 or 300,000 kilometers without the need for major internal interventions. Many people immediately think about the cost. More changes, more steps, more time. It seems expensive. Doing the math, those who perform this process themselves spend on average between $45 and $60 per change, considering quality synthetic oil, a new filter, and the extra amount used in the pre-cleaning. Over an interval of 50,000 kilometers, this results in approximately 10 changes, totaling something between $450 and $600. Compared with the traditional method, where fewer changes are made and usually at shops, the expense may be slightly lower in the short term. However, the real difference appears in what you avoid spending later. Major engine overhauls, excessive oil consumption, problems caused by internal residues, and failures in important components cost thousands. The additional amount invested in proper maintenance ends up being minimal compared to what is saved on major repairs over the life of the car. The main concept that needs to be clear is that changing oil is not just about removing an old liquid and putting in a new one. It is about removing impurities, properly preparing the engine, and giving the new oil the best possible conditions to protect internal parts. The Japanese method treats this maintenance as a technical and precise procedure, not as a quick service done in a hurry. Hot draining instead of cold draining, double draining instead of single draining, prepared filter instead of dry filter, gentle driving at the beginning instead of demanding everything from the engine right after the change. These details, which seem small individually, accumulate over hundreds of thousands of kilometers and make a huge difference in engine durability. That 2001 Civic is a real example that this result is possible when a proper routine is adopted. If these guidelines were useful to you, take the opportunity to watch the next video, where I will show practical strategies to reduce maintenance costs and keep your car running reliably for much longer.